today's class by going through the things we have covered about the potential well problem which we have been dealing with. So let me first summarize what we have done about the finite potential well problem. We have a particle moving in a potential well which has got value V0 beyond x greater than a or x less than a, and it is 0 in between from minus a to a. And we are considering a situation where there is a particle whose energy E is less than V naught. And we want to find the allowed states for this particle, the wave function for this particle. So the whole thing can be divided into three regions: region 1, region 2, region 3. In region 1, the wave function behaves, psi 1x behaves as e to the power rho x, and there is some normalization coefficient a1, where rho is given by square root of 2m v minus e by h cross squared. It is an exponentially decaying solution. In the region 2, the wave function is oscillating. So there are two parts, a1 e to the power I kx and a2 e to the power I kx and b2 e to the power minus I kx. And in region 3, it is exponentially decaying again. And we have to match the boundary conditions at these 2 points. This is what we were doing in the last class. We were matching the boundary conditions between this exponential wave here, exponential wave function here, and this oscillating wave function here. And we found that if we matched the boundary conditions, there were only some values of energy which were allowed, and they could be classified into 2 parts. One was odd n, and for this case, the wave function, the allowed values of energy had to satisfy this equation. The equation being square root of E by V naught minus E is equal to minus tan square root of 2m E by h cross square into A. And we found that for the odd wave functions, the odd n situation where n was odd, the solution, there were possible solutions, n possible solutions, n possible values of energy if the potential V naught was greater than 1 by 2m h cross by a whole square n minus 1 whole square into pi squared, where n is the number of possible odd solutions. And n could be 1, 2, 3. So if n was 1, you would have one solution. If n were 2, you would have 2 solutions. So n minus half whole square is what appears here. And if n is 1, that is you only have one solution, then you get half here. And we find that there is no solution if the potential is less than the value which you get if you put n equal to 1. So for odd n, there is no solution if the potential is less than this value. In the last class, I had written a minus over here. Just note that a plus over here. Just note that it should be a minus sign. We had just made a mistake in counting the number of times it crossed, this function crossed this. So there is no solution if the potential is smaller than this. Once the potential exceeds this value, you get one solution, and as it gets larger and larger, you get more and more solutions. You also have the situation where n was even, and the solutions, allowed values of energy, have to be obtained by solving this equation, square root of E by E minus V minus E is equal to cot square root of 2m E by h cross square into A. And the number of allowed even solutions depends on the potential in this way. So if the potential is greater than this quantity on the right hand side, 1 by 2m h cross by a whole square n minus 1 whole square pi squared, then we have n possible solutions, and n could be any integer 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. So if n is 1, then the potential should be greater than 0. So we find that there is always at least one solution. If n is 2, then for 2 solutions, then we can just put in 2 here, and we find that the potential should be greater than 1 by 2m h cross by a squared into pi squared. And for larger values of potential, you will find that there are larger even solutions. So let me discuss what happens as you change the potential. Suppose you have a situation where you can change the potential. So we are considering a situation where this width A is kept fixed, and we keep on somehow increasing the potential of the well. We make it deeper and deeper. So the situation will be as follows. No matter how small the value of the potential, you will have one solution, and this will be an even solution. So as long as the potential is less than this value over here, which is h cross square by 2m pi by a whole square, pi by 2 whole square. So we have h cross square by 2ma square, pi by 2 whole square. If the potential is less than this, no matter how small it be, you will always have one even solution. If you increase the potential, the moment it crosses this value over here, h cross square 2m a square by into pi square, then you will get, the moment it crosses this solution, but it is less than this, so you're increasing the potential. If the potential is less than this, you have only one even solution. If the potential crosses this value, but is less than this value, you will have one even, one odd solution. If you keep on increasing the potential and it crosses this value but is less than this value over here, then you will have two even and one odd. And if you keep on increasing further, then you will reach a position where you will have two even and two odd solutions. So for every unit of h cross square by 2m a square pi by 2 whole squared, for every unit of this h cross square by 2m a square pi by 2 whole square, for every unit of this, once the potential crosses one unit of this, you get one more energy level. So if it is less than this, then you have one energy level. The moment it crosses this, you get one more, one more, one more. So I have shown this pictorially over here. The potential is to start with very shallow, so you have only one energy level, E1, and this is going to be odd. Even solutions, it's going to be even, always one even solution at least, right? So this is going to be even. Then if I make the potential deeper, or make it higher over here, make the well deeper, once it crosses one unit of this much, I will get one more solution. And if I keep on increasing it, I will get another solution, and I will get one more solution. So as I keep on increasing the potential, keeping A fixed, I will get more and more solutions. Similarly, if I vary A and make the potential broader, keeping V fixed, I will have a similar situation. I will get more and more solutions as I make the potential broader. So this basically tells us all that there is to know about the allowed energy levels. Now let us look at the wave function corresponding to these different energy levels. So the wave function in the region 2, which is in the bottom of the well, is a superposition of two plane waves, e to the power ikx and e to the power minus ikx. Now these two plane waves have got two different coefficients, a2 and b2, and we still have to find what are these two coefficients, a2 and b2. Now we have to match the boundary conditions. We have to match this wave to the exponentially growing and exponentially decaying waves which we have on the two sides of this wave function. So we have to match the boundary conditions here and here for this wave function. Psi 2 is in between over here, and these boundary conditions impose the following. Let me remind you where these come from. The boundary conditions gave us these two relations. B2 was equal to minus d by c e to the power minus 2i k2a a2. This was one boundary condition, which is at minus a, and the boundary condition at a gave us this relation, which we again combined and simplified further. So what does the first condition over here gives us this relation between B2 and A2, which we can write in terms of the quantity phi which we had introduced. Earlier. So let me also show you how we had defined phi. We had set k is equal to r some cos phi and rho is equal to r sin phi, right? And we had put these into this expression for c and d. So both of these d and c over here could be written in terms of rho and k, the two wave numbers and the two sides, and k and rho we had expressed in this way. So plugging this into this relation between B2 and A2, we find that B2 and A2 are related as follows. B2 is equal to e to the power I2 phi e to the power minus I k a into A2, which is basically e to the power I2 into phi minus ka. The exponent is I2 into phi minus ka. This whole thing into A2. So this is the relation between the coefficients A2 and B2, one relation, which comes from one of the boundary conditions. The other boundary condition had imposed if we express k and rho in this fashion, the other boundary condition had told us that 4 phi, where phi is this phase over here, should be equal to 4 times ka plus 2 pi into n, where n could be any integer, right? We had obtained this in the last class. This arises from this relation over here, which is what the boundary conditions give us. Okay, so so the second both the boundary conditions together give us the relation that 2 times phi minus ka is equal to n pi, where n could be some arbitrary integer, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Now we have two situations. N could be even or n could be odd. Putting this into this relation here gives us that B2 is equal to e to the power I n pi into A2, and n could be either even or odd. So we can separately consider the cases where n is even or n is odd. When n is even, we find this just boils down to B2 is equal to A2, and the wave function, this is the wave function over here, this just becomes cos kx. So let me keep the wave function here. So if I substitute B2 is equal to A2 in this, what we get is psi 2x is equal to A2 cos kx. So for even n, we have found the different solutions, under what conditions different solutions exist, and we can also now draw the wave function, the nature of the wave function. The simplest case, which is the smallest allowed energy, this is going to be a cos function like this, and we have to match the boundary conditions with the exponential on the two sides, and it is going to decay like this. So this is the wave function corresponding to this situation. This was an even solution. This is the lowest energy even solution. The lowest energy even solution is going to have a wave function which looks like this. It is cos kx with no nodes in between, minus a and plus a, and then you have to match it to this exponentially decaying part as you go to large x and very small x. Then you have a situation, if you make the potential well deeper, you have two even solutions, which is this case over here. So the next even solution is again cos kx, but the value of k will be larger because the energy is larger. E3 is larger, so k is going to be larger, and you are going to have a situation where the cos kx will undergo this kind of an oscillation, 2 cycles. Here it has just got one part of a cycle, so here it will have more of the cycle. It will cross 0 2 times, and then you have to match the boundary conditions again at minus a and plus a. So the higher and higher values of energy will have higher and higher number of oscillations in the range minus a to plus a. Similarly, if n is odd, then you have sin kx, and the lowest allowed energy solution. So in a situation where you have only one odd and one even, for example, the odd wave function, the wave function corresponding to the odd value of energy, the odd solution for the energy, is going to look like this. You have a sin kx over here, and then at minus a and plus a you have to match it with the exponential functions. And then if you have one more odd solution, then you will have a sine wave with more oscillations in between, and then at minus a and plus a again you have to match it to the exponential. So the deeper the potential, you will get more and more energies, you will get more and more wave functions with more and more zero crossings. So as you deepen the potential, first you will have only this wave function, then you can have both this as well as this. If you make it even deeper, you can have 1, 2, 3 possible different wave functions. If you make it even deeper, you can have 4 wave functions, and it goes on. Okay. Note the fact that the ground level, the ground state, has got no crossings, no zero crossings. The wave function doesn't cross 0. There are no nodes. As you go to the first excited state, there is one zero crossing here. This is the first excited state. This is the second excited state, third excited state. So the number of nodes tells us the number of the excitation level of the corresponding wave function. Let us briefly again compare it to the situation we have solved earlier, which is the infinite potential well. So till now, in this particular example, we were dealing with a finite potential well. We had done the infinite situation earlier. In the infinite situation, the potential goes to infinity. I have shifted the origin from 0 to minus a. So the potential jumps to infinity at minus a and plus a. And we had worked out the solutions, and the solutions, if you remember, had turned out to be like this. The ground state, E1, the wave function looked like this. It had no nodes. It goes to 0 at minus a and plus a. The first excited state, the wave function looked like this. Again, it goes to 0 at minus a and plus a. Second excited state, third excited state. They are quite similar to these, except that instead of the wave function going to 0, it exponentially dies off. So when the potential is infinite, the particle is not found in the region which is not classically allowed. But if the potential is finite, there is a finite probability of finding the particle in these regions over here, where the energy is less than the potential. Classically, you will never find a particle in a place where its energy is less than the potential. But in quantum mechanics, the wave function has a finite value even in these regions, and there is a finite probability of finding the particle even when the energy is less than the potential. This is one major difference. For the infinite potential well, you have all the allowed energies. So you have an infinite number of allowed energy levels. which is what you will expect, because as you make the potential well deeper and deeper, you get more energy levels. If you make it infinitely deep, you will have infinite number of energy levels. So now let us discuss one application of this finite potential well, which we have just gone through in some detail. So the application which I am going to discuss is to do with the deuterium nucleus. The deuterium nucleus has got one neutron and one proton. It is the simplest nucleus after the hydrogen nucleus, which is only one proton. You cannot do much of nuclear physics with it, because it's a single particle. So this is the simplest nucleus, one neutron, one proton. Deuterium, it's an isotope of hydrogen. Now, this is a two-body problem. We have not discussed the two-body problem as yet. We have only been dealing with the one-body problem, a particle moving in a given potential well. Whereas here, we have two particles which interact with each other through a potential. So suppose this is the neutron, this is the proton. These two particles interact through each other through a potential VR. The potential depends only on the distance between these two particles. That's the assumption we are going to make. There is no absolute origin for this. So if I shift the two particles, keeping the separation same, the potential will not change, right? This is what we expect. There is no fixed origin for these nuclear interactions. So it is only dependent on the relative separation between these two particles, and it depends only on the magnitude of the separation, not on the direction. So in this situation, the whole dynamics, the whole motion of this deuterium nucleus can be broken up into two parts. One part is the motion of the center of mass, RCM. The second part is the motion of this relative displacement between these two particles. And the motion of the center of mass, if you work out the mathematics, is decoupled from the motion of the relative displacement between these two particles. They get separated, these two problems. And the center of mass behaves just like a free particle, which we have already solved. There are plane wave solutions with values of momentum. So the center of mass motion is very easy to work out. So starting from this two-body problem, you can show that it decouples into two one-body problems. One being the motion of the center of mass, which behaves like a free particle, and the other is the motion of this relative displacement. Okay. So the picture should be clear that you have these two particles and they interact with this nuclear potential VR. And this problem gets simplified to a one particle problem. We forget about the motion of the center of mass. We can go to a frame where the center of mass is at rest. And the motion of the center of mass is that of a free particle, so it is very simple. And the whole problem reduces to a one particle problem for the relative displacement. And the position, so we have a one particle problem, so it is as if there is one particle whose position is the relative displacement between these two particles. So we can treat the relative displacement as if there was a particle whose position were r. The mass of this effective particle is not the mass of the proton or the mass of the neutron. It is the reduced mass, which is denoted by mu, and it is related to these two masses, the mass of the neutron and the mass of the proton, as 1 by mu is equal to 1 by the mass of the neutron plus 1 by the mass of the proton. These things all actually can be worked out. Okay, two-body problem. In classical mechanics, it has nothing to do with quantum mechanics. You can work out the transformation from a two-body problem to one-body problem in classical mechanics, and many of you will be doing it in the classical mechanics course. So we have a particle of mass mu whose coordinate is given by r, moving in a potential v of r. So this two-body problem has been reduced to a one-body problem, can be reduced. And the potential v of r doesn't depend on the direction, it only depends on the magnitude. We next go on to polar spherical coordinates. So the coordinates are r, the distance of the point from the origin, theta, the angle it makes with one preferred axis, say the z-axis. So this is the z-axis, and the angle the projection makes with the x-axis, phi. We don't have to bother too much about theta and phi. We are going to restrict ourselves to solutions which don't depend on theta and phi. So we are looking for solutions of the wave function which don't have any angular dependence. These are the spherically symmetric solutions. So we want to find such spherically symmetric solutions for this particular case. So in polar coordinates, the Schrodinger equation reduces to the equation for a particle in a one-dimensional potential well. And this is the equation where we have r instead of x. So this is the problem which we have been considering all this while, a particle moving in a one-dimensional potential. So in reality, the potential is something like this. It is 0 at infinite, at very far away, and it varies very rapidly. It falls off very fast within some distance a, which is the nuclear length scale, within which the nuclear forces act. And if the particles have a large separation, the nuclear forces are negligible. So it falls off, and it is nearly negligible here. So we are going to model this, as I have told you, by a square potential well, by a potential well of a finite depth. You should note that the origin of the potential has shifted, in the sense that at infinity now the value of the potential is 0, and it falls to a value minus V naught. This doesn't make any difference to the analysis. You can carry over whatever we have done to this situation by just changing some sign, adding some constants to the energy and the potential. So the potential is 0 at infinity, and it suddenly drops at the value a. Now r, you should note, is the radial coordinate. It measures the distance from the origin. So r is necessarily greater than or equal to 0. R cannot be negative. The problems which we have been dealing with, x could go from minus infinity to infinity. But the coordinate r necessarily is greater than 0. So this can be accounted for in the following way. The potential which we introduce, it is infinite if r is less than 0. This effectively prevents the particle from being anywhere less than r. So the potential is infinite if r is less than 0. This is r here. If r is less than 0, the potential is infinite. Between 0 and a, the potential is minus V naught, and beyond a, the potential is 0. We have just shifted the whole thing down. So this is the situation. So it is the old problem which we had, where there was a potential going from minus a to a, except that we have made it infinite at 0 instead of it being like this. So we have to solve this problem, and the solutions of this problem can be easily obtained by the solutions of the previous problem which we have solved, where we had a potential which was constant from minus a to a and 0 on both sides. For this, the solutions, the basic equation for this problem is the same in this region greater than r0. R greater than 0, the basic equations are exactly the same. For r less than 0, the potential has to be 0. And for continuity of the potential of the wave function, r has to also go to 0 at psi has to also go to 0 at r equal to 0. So psi has to be 0 everywhere on the left hand side of the origin, and it has to also vanish at r equal to 0 because we want it to be continuous. Okay, so we have to impose the condition that psi vanishes at this point. Now, if you look at the odd and the even wave functions, so these are the even wave functions, this, and these are the odd wave functions. It is obvious that the even wave functions are ruled out because they don't vanish at the origin. But the odd wave functions vanish at the origin. So I can construct a wave function which is 0 everywhere over here, and it has this kind of a behavior on the right hand side. And this will be a solution of this problem. So I can construct a wave function. I take this solution over here, this odd solution over here, and I just modify it so that it looks like this, and it goes to 0 over here, and it remains 0 on the left hand side. This is a solution to this problem, because the problem which we have solved earlier is exactly the same as this problem everywhere on this side. For negative values of r, the wave function should be 0, and that's what we have here. So this is the ground state, the lowest energy state solution of this problem. So we have only odd solutions, and we see that the odd solutions exist only if the potential is greater than this value. For values of the potential less than this, there are no odd solutions. So if there is to be a bound state for this, if there has to be a solution with the energy less than 0, which is less than the value at infinity for the potential, then the depth of the potential well should be greater than this value over here, 1 by 2m pi by a, h cross by a whole squared, h cross by a whole squared, and pi by 2 whole squared. So the potential should be at least deeper than this. Now for the deuterium nucleus, it is found that there is only one bound state. There aren't more than that. So experimentally it is found that the deuterium nucleus has only one bound state. The nucleus has no excited states. So if you try to excite it, it will just break up into the neutron and the proton. Which tells us that the potential V0 should also be less than 1 by 2m h cross by a whole square, 3 by 2 pi whole squared. Because if the potential were more than this, then you would have one more allowed state, odd state. So the potential we find has to be in this range. It has to be more than this and less than this in this model. Okay. It is also found that the binding energy of the deuterium atom is 2.367 mega electron volts. And the width of the potential A, we can take to be the range of the nuclear interaction, which is 2.8 into 10 to the power minus 13 centimeters. So I leave it to you as a problem to find the value of V0. We saw that V0 must lie in the range, in some range, if there is to be a solution. Now I tell you the value of the energy, which is the solution. I also tell you the width of the potential well. So you have to solve the equation for the energy and find out the value of the potential for which this is actually the solution. So this is one way in which this simple model which we have used can be used to find out, which we have found, we just discussed, can be used to find out the depth of the nuclear potential. No doubt this is a somewhat crude model. This is a crude model for this kind of a potential, but it is better than being able to do nothing. Okay. So this gives us some idea of the depth of the nuclear potential in this crude model. So now let us go on to discussing a different situation. So this completes the bound states for the finite potential well. These are states with energy less than the value of the potential. Now let us briefly consider the situation where the energy is more than the value of the potential. So we have the same potential well. V x and there is a potential V naught from minus A to A. And we want to now consider a situation where the energy of the particle E is greater than V naught. Now this is region 1, this is region 2, this is region 3. The wave function in region 1 is psi 1 x is equal to a1 e to the power I k1 x plus b1 e to the power minus I k1 x. Psi 2x is equal to a2 e to the power I k2x plus b2 e to the power minus I k2x, and psi 3x is equal to a3 e to the power I k1x plus b3 e to the power minus I k1x. Where k1 and k2, we can also write down the expressions for k1. K1 is, so how much is k1? K1 is equal to square root of 2m e minus v naught by h cross square, and k2 is square root of 2m e, just e over here, by h cross square, and both k1 and k2 are real. So in this situation there is no restriction. If you match the boundary conditions over here, here, these 2 points, you will find that there are and there is no both of these, all 3 of these wave functions are oscillatory in nature, and there is no restriction that either a1 or b1, a2, b2, a3, b3, any of them have to vanish. All are allowed. And the situation is as follows. It is like when you send light through a medium. Say you are sending light through a piece of glass, a slab of glass. What happens when light goes from vacuum into the slab of glass? The wavelength of light changes, right? And then when it comes out, the wavelength of light changes again. This situation over here is exactly the same. You have a wave over here with some wavelength. Inside the potential well, the wavelength has changed, and over here again the wavelength goes back to the original value. So you have a wave over here with some wavelength, and inside this it has a different wavelength, and here again it goes back to the original wavelength. And you have to just match boundary conditions, and there will be only 2 independent coefficients. It is exactly analogous to the situation in optics where you have a wave passing through some medium with different refractive index. The energy remains unchanged as it goes through these. Okay. The problem here arises because the wave function is exponential and it doesn't die out at infinity, minus infinity or plus infinity. It keeps on just oscillating. So the question arises, how do you normalize the wave function? How do you get wave functions which are normalized? How do you construct get normalized wave functions? because for each of these functions, the integral minus infinity to infinity psi x, psi star x, psi x dx is going to blow up, will diverge. Because if I multiply psi 1 with psi 1 star, I will get some constants and some cross terms. If I integrate those constants from minus infinity to infinity, it will diverge, the integral will diverge. The wave just keeps on oscillating even if I go to infinity. So the problem is, how do I get normalized wave functions? Well, you could take 2 points of views. One point of view is that you never do an experiment where you have a particle, the wave function defined everywhere. Wherever you do an experiment, there is always an outer cavity, an outer wall, inside which you know the particle is for sure. So you can, suppose you're doing an experiment in a laboratory, for example, you could take the point of view that the laboratory, the walls of the laboratory define the bounds of my experiment. The particle is definitely not outside the laboratory. So I can treat the laboratory walls as an infinite potential well, and I'm doing my experiment in an infinite potential well. If I take that point of view, then I get a set of discrete states. I no longer, these values of k, as we have seen for an infinite potential well, the energy levels are discrete, they are not continuous. Whereas if I were treating the walls, if I were considering a situation where the walls did not exist, then k could be any value. But if I doing my experiments inside a potential well, infinite potential well, there would be a discrete set of energy levels. If my potential well corresponds to a room of some few meters width, the separation between these energy levels is more or less negligible. But you can normalize the wave function, because the wave function goes to 0 beyond the size of the room or whatever, wherever you're doing your experiment. So one possibility is box normal. This is called box normalization. So you're doing your whole experiment inside a bigger infinite potential well of some size length, okay, of length L. So if this whole experiment is being done inside some big infinite potential well somewhere here, okay, which represents the room or the apparatus, the bounds of the apparatus. So this is one possibility, but in this possibility you have to remember that the values of k which are allowed are no longer continuous, there are discrete values of k, but the separation between these discrete values is very small. Other possibility is that you can construct wave functions by superposing different values of k so as to get a wave function which is normalizable. This is a way of incorporating the physical fact that you will never have a situation where the particle has a precise, well-defined value of momentum. There will be a width in momentum, and if you incorporate this, if you superpose some different states with some width in momentum, so if this is k, you construct some finite width, so if this is the amplitude of k. So you can superpose, so you can get a psi x by superposing ak e to the power ikx dk by 2 pi square root with some finite width in k centered around the value you wanted to have, for example the Gaussian wave packet, and you could produce normalized wave functions. Okay. For mathematical manipulations, we can treat this to be just a single value of k, but you should bear in mind that we are actually if you want to have a normalized wave function, you have to superpose wave functions with different values of k over some finite width in k. Okay, so these are two possible ways of producing normalized wave functions. So you should bear this in mind when we are dealing with this kind of a situation. Okay, that you have to do This problem exists and you have to deal with it if you want to produce normalized wave functions. Now, so this problem of a situation where the energy is greater than the potential, I shall not be dealing with in any more depth. It is quite simple. If you are given the condition that the particles are only coming from this side and not from this side, it will impose some conditions on these coefficients A, B, etc., which we shall be encountering in a slightly different context shortly. Now let us consider, go back to the general situation where we have a potential barrier again, could be like this, and it could be doing at some point, let us say A, this is V, and the potential jumps from some value, say 0 to V naught over here. And we have seen that we can match the boundary conditions and relate the coefficients of the wave function on these two sides. Now, we want to consider a situation where, a physical situation where you are sending particles from this side. We are sending in particles from this side and there are no particles coming in from here. Like in optics, you send in light from one side and you see what happens to the light. So something very similar to what happens in optics happens here also. A part of the light will get reflected. So this is incident. A part of it will get reflected and a part of it will get transmitted. And the part which gets reflected and transmitted, you can calculate by matching the boundary conditions. Now, how do you represent this? How much of, how many particles are incident, or what is this incident quantity? How do you mathematically quantify? So the quantity you look at for the incident part is the momentum current, is the probability current. So the probability current is the quantity So the probability current tells you the rate of flow of the probability density. And if I have a surface over here, surface area, or if I have a line, then this surface area into the probability current will tell me the rate at which the probability density is flowing across this surface. Right, that was what the continuity equation told us. The probability current, if this is the probability current J, this into the surface area will tell me the rate at which the probability density is flowing across this. And the probability density represents the probability of finding the particle there. So the probability current tells us that, gives us an idea at the rate at which the particle is flowing across in some way. The probability of finding the particle is flowing across that surface. Okay. So if you want to calculate, study this situation, you have to look at the probability currents for the incident wave, the reflected wave and the transmitted wave. And the reflection coefficient R is defined to be J reflected by J incident. And the transmission, this is the reflection coefficient. The transmission coefficient T is defined to be J transmitted by J incident. Okay, Ji. So this physically represents a situation where I am sending in the wave corresponding to one particle here. A part of the wave will get transmitted, a part of it will get reflected. And this represents the part which will get reflected, this is the part which gets transmitted. Okay, the mod, this should be the mod of this, because these are real quantities. So in the next class, I will calculate these reflection and transmission coefficients first for this simple situation, and then for a more complicated situation which we shall introduce in the next class.